people would stop me and ask me questions about, why are you taking a water sample? What are you measuring? Is there something wrong? So I spent a lot of time working with the public in my role as a researcher. And that's when I realized, this is the part I really love. And that's not necessarily a big part of science. It's pretty much an individual contributor kind of thing. You're not working a lot with people outside the academic world. And I knew that that's really where I wanted to go. So when I moved here, I decided to make the leap to do that.
So something that's really, really, really big in what you just communicated is, what we're doing at Live a Choice is we're teaching people to look at what you do in your everyday life, look at your everyday career, find the parts within it where your heart sings. That will point the direction on how you develop where you go in your career and going forward with future jobs about what, because, frequently people come to us, and I'm sure you've heard it, lived it, being, a manager. People are not necessarily happy in the job, but what they don't know is to be directed to where is the joy within what you're currently doing. And that's what you just said. I took an education, I took a career path, and all of a sudden I began to discover that something in that I was really doing that brought the joy to me, and that's what you're now pursuing.
Exactly. And I work a lot with biotech companies in what I do, so I still have that element of working with highly complex topics. Even my software clients, typically they have very complex products that I have to dig in deep with the engineers and really understand why did they create that, or dig in with the scientists and understand what they're trying to achieve, and then get the value and benefit of that across to people who are going to buy it, which is essentially marketing. But for me, it feels like it's that same thing. It's that living in two worlds, that taking the very complicated technical stuff and making people understand it, because they're not going to buy it if they don't understand it.
Right. So, so Jennifer, we know where you are now. We know that you are that entrepreneur. We know you've had a couple of businesses or companies. This one is, I guess, 6 years now, right?
6 years.
6 years. And so let's talk about, because what we want to bring to our listeners tonight is where did you make the leap, really? I mean, you were in that, and I say this tongue-in-cheek when I say this, I want you to know it's tongue-in-cheek when I say in that comfort zone of a seat of a corporate world, and we all know how uncomfortable that seat can be. So I say it really with tongue-in-cheek, but in truth, there are certain things about being an employee within a corporate world that feels, whether it is or not, has a sense of safeness or feeling of safeness about it. And you made that leap. You came out of that world, and you made the leap into a business of 6 years of success, an award-winning business. So what I want us to do now is I want to talk about, let's go back 6, 7 years, and let's look at, you're sitting in that seat, and you're trying to make this decision based on you discovered that you do not see yourself, for whatever reason, corporately, able to deliver on the service that can be provided. And the head's thinking and it's going, and all the thoughts are playing out about how do you make the leap? What are you going to do? So let's talk about, because that's where people sit a lot of the time, and I just want to bring some experience of walking through that path to our listeners tonight. So what were some of the thoughts that went through your mind as you really began to entertain making that break from the comfort seat of the corporate world?
Well, that's a particularly complex question. So where can I start? I think it had always, to be honest, it was always in my head. I had a great boss, mentor, and now good friend who said to me one day, don't worry about the next job, worry about the one after that. Because I was at that point in a very intense job hunt. And it was such a simple statement, but it was so important to me because I realized, this job that I was considering at that time was fine, and I was interested in it. There were some concerns I had about it, which proved to be correct. But I knew that it was the right choice because that job would solidify the next step, which would be to open this business. So I did take that job, the interim job, and it did make a big difference for the success of the business, and I did what I was able to do within that context. In terms of when did I actually make that decision of, okay, I'm going to jump now, leap and the net will appear, which was my favorite saying at that time of my life. Although lately I'm saying it a lot.
Again. Jennifer, before you talk about when you made the leap, I want to bring the experience that you went through in making the decision to make the leap. I want to bring that experience, because that's really where they live every day, if you will, is how to, in that muddled conversation in the head about what the concerns were and what the fears were. So let's talk about that before you say, this is when I did it, and here's how I did it.
I don't like talking about fears, but I'll do it for you.
I know.
So I had a ton of fears, as Bellany knows. I was involved in a coaching group with Bellany at the time, and I had a ton of fears around leaving the corporate world, some of which were completely unfounded and some of which were not. One of the pieces of advice that I got when I was considering doing this was someone said to me, have you written all this down, and also write down the things that you think are obstacles that are standing in the way of you doing this, or things that you think you need to have in order to do this. And there are 6 items. I have them in my journal, which I still have, and I write in it every year on my annual retreat. And there were 6 items on that list. And I'm telling you, those 6 items on that list in my head were insurmountable. When I wrote them down on paper, some of them were actually kind of funny. They were so ridiculous. Other ones I needed to take some action in terms of talking with someone who I was close to that would be impacted by my decision, talking with some other folks that I felt could really help me formulate it, but I had some concerns about how it was going to impact them since I was close to them from a business perspective. So once I got them down on paper, they were much more manageable. I was able to knock 2 off right away. That's ridiculous. And tackle the other 4, and a couple of them were things that I just had to decide I was going to take that risk. But when they were in my head, they were huge, and I was never going to be able to overcome them. So putting them down on paper, and that's been an essential process that I've followed since the beginning. I've always been a writer, hence the reason I probably walked into communications from science. But I find when I write things down, 2 things happen. 1, fears seem a lot smaller when I write it down. And the things that I want, this has happened to me repeatedly. I write down what I want, I close the book, I put it away. Half the time, if I do nothing else, a number of those things will happen for me, even though I haven't done anything. I don't know what it is, a secret, whatever. But I put that intention out there, and it just happens. I don't understand it, but it works. So I had to go through that process of really identifying what are the things that I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of the lack of security. Well, when I put that down on paper, it was pretty funny because as I was doing that, I had dozens and dozens and dozens of friends getting laid off from very big public companies. That's security?
Right.
I have more security as a self-employed person than I had when I was working for corporate.
Exactly.
If I lose a client, I just get a new one.
That's right. You're the one at the helm.
Right. It's not like someone has control of my life and says, okay, today you're on your butt. That can't happen. I can lose a big client and that can hurt, but in a couple months I'm back with another one.
Right.
So writing those fears down, I think, is really key.
Well, the important part about writing the fears down is it gets it out of your head and gets it down separate from you where you can look at it as whether it's real or not. And what you come to learn also is that fear is only as real as you bring the life to it. And so get it out of your head and you get it onto paper, you have removed the aliveness and you can look at it from a third perspective. Does that make
Exactly.
sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, very much